Hey, 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 everyone. This is your host, Jasmin Haley, and today's guest is Angy Rodriguez. Now, many of you that are listening to this podcast have probably heard this name several times mentioned. And I have such an honor to meet with her virtually, never in person, but I know that there are many of you that are going to resonate with her incredible story. Maria Rodriguez, better known as Angy, graduated from Rio Salado College in 2017. She became one of the nation's few DACA dental hygienists. We'll explain what that means later. Overcoming adversity to achieve her dream. Angie's passion for dental hygiene is unwavering, recognizing the immense dedication it took to earn her RDH credentials as a dreamer. In her 6 years of practice, Angie has been fortunate to work as a tip hygienist, exposing her to various types of offices, software, and new technologies. She recently expanded beyond clinical hygiene. Listen in, y'all, to become the learning and development manager at Cloud Dentistry. Yes. Her collaboration with influential speakers and educators has fueled her interest in public speaking, enabling her to share her inspiring journey and insights with others. Welcome to the show, Angie.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me, Jasmine. When you asked if I would be interested in coming on here and sharing my story, I couldn't say yes fast enough. I'm so excited to be here, and it's really an honor. You've created such an incredible platform. So thank you for being here and having me share my story.
Yeah, I need to thank you. I need to thank you for being willing to get out there and share parts of your journey that often is behind the scenes and is not discussed at all. I had no idea what you had been through, and I felt so inspired and motivated by you just sharing a small glimpse into what you do. So I would just want to say thank you, because I think the hardest part for most of us as we are in our professional journeys is figuring out, what parts of it do we want to share, how we're going to make an impact. And you have certainly
Absolutely.
made one. So I want to dive in a little bit into your journey, and I know that the other listeners are going to love it as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself for anyone that doesn't know me, isn't familiar with me. I was born in Mexico from Mexico Nayarit. They call us coritas, which means 25 cents because we're part of an indigenous group that has like 25% some type of lineage. I need to dive deeper into my history. But so if there's anyone out from Nayarit, hi, corita, sister, brother. And so I was born there. I was raised there for the first 5 years of my life. I have some very, very vague memories of my time in Mexico. My mom still lives there. My siblings are still there, some of my siblings. And I do have some siblings here. But what I do remember is my kindergarten year here in the United States. Those are some of my most recent memories. If I think back to like, what's the earliest memories you have? I feel that I blocked out a lot of Mexico, and I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. But when I look back, I remember being in kindergarten and in first grade here in the United States. And so for a lot of my story, some people might ask, we'll get into what DACA is and what a dreamer is if people don't know. But I didn't know that I was a dreamer or undocumented
Mm,
until probably about late middle school, early high school. I started piecing the pieces together and researching and understanding what that was. And so you might think, well, you were born in Mexico. How do you not know that you're not, from this country? And I think it's because I blocked a lot of that time of my life out. Now, if you ask my stepmom who raised us here and my dad, why maybe that happened, it's because the reason we were brought to the United States, my sister and I, it's four of us, was because we were going through some terrible things in Mexico. We had signs of physical and sexual abuse, and someone that saw us, we lived with my mom and she worked a lot. And I think strange men were finding their way into our home while my mom was at work. And a neighbor called my dad, who was in the United States working at that time, and was like, hey, I think something's going on with your daughters. I'm seeing all kinds of men going into your house in the middle of the night, and I'm worried for your daughters. And my dad, who was working in construction here in Arizona in the United States, during his lunch hour, he got this call from Mexico where the neighbor told him that he started crying. And the lunch lady, you know those roach coaches, they call them like the
Yeah,
lonchera.
yeah.
My stepmom was the lonchera woman at his work, and she saw my dad crying. Now she had been giving lunch to this construction site for some time, so she knew my dad. She knows all the workers there. She sees him crying. She says, "What's wrong?" And he says, "Oh, I just got word that my daughter, something's going on. I don't know all the details." And she was like, "Don't worry, I'll help you. If
Mm,
if you have a family member there or anything, that can give us details on your daughters, if for whatever reason or some way they can come to the United States, either by filing for asylum or refugee. There's different types of visas you can file for. I'll help your daughters out. I will house them." And they end up getting married down the line. So she
mhm.
had 4 daughters. My dad had 4 daughters. They together had children. So there was 12 of us growing up at home.
Wow.
It was a full house. And I'm not sure how we were brought to the United States. I really don't remember that part because I was so young. I
Yeah.
just know that I just remember growing up in the United States and going to school. And so I will talk your ear off, but do you have any questions so far on that part before I keep on
Well,
going?
tell the listeners. So you have a complex beginning, right? Um, I want the listeners to know exactly what does DACA mean and why is the term dreamer used?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I found that when I go around and talk with different people, a lot of people don't know what DACA is, and I don't
Mhm,
expect them to be. DACA is pretty big in states like Florida, Texas, California, Arizona, Illinois. But if you're anywhere in the East Coast, you're probably not very familiar with it, although there are DACA people nationwide. And DACA, so it stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was enacted in summer of 2012. And this can be for anyone. I think when people think of DACA, they think of Hispanic people, but I have friends that have DACA that are from China, that are from India. So they can really be from anywhere. And it just means that they came to the United States as a child without proper documentation. It could have
mhm,
been that they came with a visa and overstayed their visa and then got undocumented status. So it's a very touchy subject for obvious reasons. So I don't like to go into the political aspect of it. I just
mhm,
like to inform on what is DACA, if you have anyone that has DACA, if there's any dental educators. A lot of teachers, professors, instructors don't know what DACA is, and they don't know that they have DACA dental students in their classrooms. So they don't
mhm,
know how to help those students through their hygiene or dental career.
mhm,
But for me, when I went through school, I got to middle school in Arizona, they have something where if you exceed your we have AIMS, which is the standardized testing that they have here. If you exceed all 4 of them, you get a full ride tuition to college. And I remember taking all 4, exceeding, and my 8th grade teacher was so excited for me. He said, "All you have to do is do this again your freshman year of high school, and you have a full ride to any end state college." And so, freshman year, took our standardized testing, exceeded all of them. I went to my counselor and I was so excited. I was like, okay, so now I want to start preparing. I was always like preparing. I'm like, I'm a freshman. I want to go to dental school. I knew I wanted to do something in the dental field. And so I said, how do I get to pick my college? That's where my counselor, we kind of started piecing together because she had me fill out an application. And I came home to my parents, was like, what's my social security number? They're
mhm,
like, my dad's like, we don't have one.
mhm,
um,
mhm,
my dad was like, use your cell phone number. I remember that's what he had told me for to fill out my application because he also didn't understand like how
mhm,
all of this stuff worked. And so that's when I realized that I wasn't going to have the same path that my friends did.
mhm.
And from there
So let's
on,
go back for a second. Let's go back. Why the term dreamer? Why is that
oh,
associated with DACA?
yeah, I completely skipped right over that. So they call us dreamers because for a while, instead of DACA, they were wanting to pass the Dream Act, which was that anyone who came here as a child had a good background check, never committed any felonies, anything like that, was in school or getting a degree, could get permission to become a citizen after you or a resident by passing your test. So that was the Dream Act. That unfortunately never got passed. We got DACA instead, but we kind of ran with that because we were like, yeah, we are dreamers. Like, I dream of a day where I could have a driver's license, because before DACA, we couldn't get a driver's license. So we were all driving, scared to get pulled over. And if you get pulled over, that's a mark on your background check. And then you might not qualify for stuff down the line, or you get deported. And I did have a couple times where I got pulled over, and luckily the police officers I got were kind and empathetic and didn't write me up or anything, but that was a real fear. So we had these big dreams. All of my friends that I knew that were in the DACA community, I don't know if it's something about the immigrant mentality, but we had these big dreams to be doctors and lawyers. And it was very sad as we each got older and we went into middle school and high school and college. We started to see those dreams, all the obstacles that get placed in front of you. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can't be a dentist, but I could be a hygienist. And,
Yeah.
come to find out I love that field, and I would never want to be a dentist now, even if I could get the chance to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why we call ourselves dreamers. Other people call us dreamers. I love that
Yeah.
name.
I love that. So when you decided to do dental hygiene, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because I think it's important. We do have educators that listen. I'm a current educator. I do continuing education, but I also have work in a dental hygiene program. And I think, before we started recording this, I was sharing with you, I've had students come in that dealt with different challenges. I have also seen faculty not be as patient, not be as kind, okay, to our students that come in that have some language barriers, right? And who are working with it. I remember, and we're not just talking people of Latin descent, we're talking people who come from places like China, Korea. I mean, all over the globe,
Hmm.
folks have come in. But I have noticed some of the challenges, and I've always tried to work on making sure I was empathetic towards that and gave them the necessary time to let them know that we can be of support and what other resources could we provide for them. So I would love for them to hear firsthand what were some of those challenges that you faced in school, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and hats off to you for going out there and seeking these answers and asking these questions, because I do believe a lot of educators, they have so much on their plate that they're just focused on, let me graduate these students, but they don't
Yeah.
really either get the chance or spend the time learning about the different issues that their students could be facing. And it could be something completely different than DACA. It could be financial struggles that their students are facing, all kinds of things. So thank you for doing the research and asking these questions. I think in my search for becoming a hygienist, on the if we go way back before even entering a hygiene program, on the high school level, there's not a lot of high school, and I know this doesn't technically apply to hygiene instructors, but there's not a lot of resources that help kids that want to go into trade jobs or technical careers. Like dental hygiene, you can get your 4-year degree, but you can also get a 2-year degree, and that's a really good starting off point. I haven't had the chance to further my degree, but I think that we need to implement programs in high schools where we teach students about these careers where maybe you don't have 400K saved up to go to college or a big college fund, and you can get these high paying jobs where your education can just continue to grow. And I mean, you've seen it. You get your associates and your bachelors and your masters, and then you're doing all these things. So on the high school level, I think we need to encourage more students to go into skilled careers such as hygiene. On the hygiene level, in the hygiene programs, teachers need to familiarize themselves with what other things are out there. And it's easy for me to say because I don't have to do the work, but DACA is just one of many different programs that are out there. I'm sure there's different types of visas. And I think teachers should have an income survey when the students come in, where the students, they can ask the students certain questions. It could be anonymous. That way the student doesn't feel like they have to lie about anything, but they can ask, are you working? Are you currently working through hygiene school? Yes or no? Do you have any financial struggles? Do you have any mental health? just a form, just like we do with our patients when they come in, a screening form. You go through the stack of 30, 40, and this kind of gives you an idea of like, this is the class that I have. These are the different struggles that I'm having. Because if my teachers had asked me, I would have put on there, I'm DACA. They would have been like, oh, what is DACA? And then maybe they could have scheduled on 101 with me where I explained to them what it was. Because I went all through hygiene school, my 2 years, and the very last semester, the last quarter, right before taking boards, one of the college counselors had called me into the office. One, she had said that I needed to quit my job because I was doing poorly in school. I was working full time, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at night, driving to the college, sleeping in the parking lot for 2 hours, then going to class. So I was performing poorly. I was getting by with C's. And I know they say C's get degrees, but if you're going to be in people's mouths, it's probably better that you retain the information and understand it. And so she said, one, you need to quit your job. And I was like, I can't because that's how I'm paying for school. Two, they had said, we also found out that you can't take your board exam to become a hygienist. And I was like, wow, I've been in school for 2 years and you're just now telling me this? This seems like something you should have told me at the beginning of the program. And I think the reason they did this is because if you go on any application for dental hygiene licensing on in any state, it says in order to get your license, you need to be a US citizen or legally reside in the United States. And I think because they didn't understand what DACA was, they didn't understand that having DACA did give you legal residence in the United States, even if you weren't a US resident. So,
Mhm.
long-winded way to say that I think we need more education on these topics, and I think a screening form is an amazing way to do that.
That is a brilliant, brilliant suggestion. I think it would help so much. It made me reflect on some of the conversations I had with folks who had challenges, and I didn't know unless I pulled them aside and noticed that they were struggling. We actually have some similarity because I had to work through school. I was the fifth child of six, the only one to attempt to go to college. My mom was a single parent. She had no direction. She couldn't tell me how to do anything. I was working at UPS, y'all, at
Wow.
night. I would, and
Night shift. Oh, wow.
that I was in the night shift, okay? First of all, I went for that interview and they were like, "You want to be a loader of trucks?" Yeah, we actually have something else you can do because I looked like totally like the suit on and everybody else was looking crazy, but I needed a job. I had to pay rent. I had to take care of myself. And I wind up working nights. And I remember one of my professors checking in on me because I had an 8 a.m. class and I was not making that, and I was just exhausted. I was exhausted. So I
Wow.
think, by knowing a little bit of what we're dealing with, and because
Mhm.
I was moving from place to place, I had issues with the people I were renting from. Like it was so much and working. I didn't have the liberty of wasting time. Um, how much it would have been a wonderful support and motivator for me to be able to hear, like, we understand, you keep going. They if they understood the full picture. Needless to say, my professors were wonderful. I do wanna say that. They are old school.
If they're
They were
listening.
wonderful. If they're listening, they're retired. I appreciate each of every one of you because although you didn't know the back end story of that, I felt supported. Now, add in if there was language barriers, if I was not sure about my status in the country where I could potentially like that measure of pressure is a lot to be dealing with. So I
Mhm.
think that that is brilliant. I think that there is a shift happening in the world where we're more aware of us as human beings, our mental health, all of these things that impact us. And we want people to feel like they're seen, heard, and valued, even when they're in, even when they're in dental hygiene school, and even when they get a job. I mean, you see right now at the time of this recording, so many people, so many hygienists have left their jobs for not being seen, heard, and valued. And it's like there needs to be a shift in doing that for our profession, and it can start in hygiene school.
I couldn't agree more. I'm like, preach, yes, yes, yes. I think for whatever reason in healthcare careers, even outside of dental, I'm like, why do we treat the people that are supposed to be treating other people so bad? Like we expect these doctors and dentists and hygienists to work these long shifts without taking a bathroom break, and
Yeah.
like they're taking care of other people. So you think our health as healthcare providers is first and foremost, and then we can take care of others. And that, like you said, that needs to start in hygiene school, where we learn to take care of ourselves even back there. And I like that you
Yeah.
said that you had great professors, because you hear a lot of these stories when hygienists talk about their experience in hygiene school and how horrible and traumatizing it was, and that makes me so sad. I'm like, what
Yeah.
happened
Yeah.
that the
Not all my
experience
friends will
was
say
so
that
bad?
though. Not all my
Really?
friends at school. But I will say I loved all my teachers.
It's funny because
I haven't
I
got no
feel the
problems.
same way. I I talk to my friends and I feel the same way. I'm like, "Man, I loved my professors." Now, I did go out of my way the first day of school. I went to all of them and I was like, "Hey, I'm working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'm getting out of work, coming here, sleeping in the
Yeah.
parking lot. So if you see my hair greasy, if you see me sleeping before class, like just know it's no disrespect to you. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to show up to class looking not professional." And I think because I had clear communication with them, I felt like my professors were rooting for me from day one. Like
Yes.
they did everything. They really pushed me to the finish line. Now,
Oh,
I
I
think
love
our
that.
counselors could have been better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But they have a whole college to take care of, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think our counselors could have been better. I think back to, that counselor telling me that I couldn't take my hygiene board exam. What if
Yeah.
I had just listened to them and been like cried and been like, okay, I just won't show up for my board. I already paid for it. But instead I was like, well, I already did. I'm already done with school. I already paid my fine, like my fees for the board exams. Like I'm just gonna show up, and what's the worst thing that can happen? They ID me at the front of the testing center and turn me away, and then fine, sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
sure enough, I went to work that night. It's so funny. My car broke down the morning that I was supposed to drive to the testing center, and
Girl.
I know, I was like, someone's really testing me. Like
The devil.
someone really wants me to work for this career, because but it's so strange because there was so I worked at a retirement home. That was my night job, and there was a custodian there. Her name is Esther. I had never said one word to her besides good morning, a couple things here and there. But she's driving down to the parking lot at the retirement home at 6 a.m. She was starting her 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. And she sees me outside my car, like crying, like hysterical. And she's like, "What's wrong, mija?" And I was like, "My car won't start and I have to go take my test for dental hygiene." She pulls out her keys and she's like, "Here, take my car." I did not know this woman. She didn't know if I had a driver's license, if I even knew how to drive, like,
Angel on earth. Angel
angel,
on yes. But
angel, like,
you could probably go back and know that there's multiple times where that's happened in your life.
oh, yeah. And so for all
Oh,
the bad things, I know, like, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." I felt silly sharing my story because I'm like, everyone's got struggles. And sometimes when you share your story, you don't want it to sound like you're bragging about yourself, like, "Oh, I've had such a hard life and look at me and look at this." But I'm like, no, because I had struggles, but look, for me, it's like, look what came out of it. Like, this was
yeah.
all good. This was all a blessing. I'm sharing my struggles because look what they led to.
Yeah, yeah. The resilience, the courage, the strength. You just reminded me of the time where I had no money for gas and my car shut down on me while I was driving
No.
it.
While you were driving.
Yes, and I was happy that I was maybe a few blocks away from where I lived, and I was at the top of a hill because I went to school in a mountainous kind of area,
Mhm.
and I put that thing on neutral, and I rolled it down the hill till I got to my house and parked it, but I didn't have money. I had no money to put gas in that car, and I wanna thank Bonnie, who was one of my classmates that gave me $20 to
Wow.
get
And
some
that
gas in the car.
$20 I'm
Yes.
sure it went a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love that you share that. I want to just now segue to the next part here, because
Yeah.
I know the listeners are curious. You're practicing clinical hygiene, and now you've decided to do something outside of clinical. So
Mhm.
I want to know, like, how that came about. How did you prepare yourself for a role like what you have right now outside of
Yeah.
clinical hygiene?
Yeah, so obviously I was able to take my test when I showed up and I got my license. They didn't turn me away. So I got my license. I started practicing in 2018. So I graduated 2017, started practicing 2018. And then I quickly went into temping because I wanted to get a feel for what kind of office I wanted to be in. And I found that I had a love for temping. I just liked that I could go in. Hygienists in Arizona were not allowed to work independently of the doctor. I know in Colorado and like California, you could be an RDHAP, but I've always craved that being able to like go in, do my job, do it well, and like leave. So that's what I loved about it. So through this job, I got connected with the staffing platform that I now work for. And it was the first time I remember it was a really scary leap because I was making money. I was making really good money as a hygienist, traveling office to office and, I was charging a little bit more than I would if I was at an office full time because I'm paying for my gas, I'm paying, all the extra little things. And when I came across this company that was hiring, I remember thinking, this is way different than what I'm doing now, but it's still in the dental field.
Yeah.
Maybe I should look into it because my husband and I were getting ready to move states and
Mm.
the headache with getting your license in a different state. I
Oh
I won't
yes,
go I
ma'am.
won't go into all of that. I have some thoughts, but I will not go into all of that.
That'll be the next episode. You come back.
Oh, yeah, I can talk 2 hours on that. Um, so I was like, I need to get another job while I it's gonna take, like, 6 months for me to get my license in Texas if I'm lucky, and at that time, I just so happened to see a job posting for the company that I'm with now. And I applied. Well, before I applied, I looked at the salary and I was like, "Ooh, that's really bad." I was like, "That is not what I'm going from making almost 6 figures as a dental hygienist to almost like half of that." I was like, "I don't think I can do that." And I talked to my husband and he's like, "Well, why don't" it was remote work. He said, "Why don't you try it out because it's something different. You add new skills to your resume." And I applied. I ended up getting the job. It's a fantastic company. I love them. I've grown so much with them. But it was very difficult after only doing clinical hygiene to switch mindsets into like
Hmm.
marketing and all these different things that you don't get to do when you're working full time clinically. Like, I'm still learning a lot, having
Yeah.
conversations, negotiating,
Mm.
showing up presentable and not in I'm used to showing up in scrubs to everything, and I'm like, "Wait, you're telling me I have to go to a trade show and I can't wear my scrubs?" So, it's been a learning curve, but I've gotten so much value out of it. I will never stop working clinically, but I feel really grateful that I found a company where I could pick up all these skills. I use Excel now, G Sheets, all the things that I never really wanted to learn how to do. Like, I'm building landing pages out with CRM, like HubSpot software, really neat things that as a hygienist, we don't get the opportunity to do often. And I hope that it transfers over to other careers if and when I'm moving on to the next part of my career.
It absolutely will. It
I hope
absolutely will.
so. I
No
mean,
doubt.
and you
There's no
do it
doubt.
all, so you're the perfect person to know on this because you run your own business. You do all aspects of hygiene and business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something liberating for us as hygienists when we can understand the business side of our clinical care, but also so many other parts. The marketing, you mentioned systems, like using a client relationship management, a CRM, right? HubSpot,
Mhm.
building landing pages, having those skills make us versatile. We can go anywhere. So I feel that now when I walk into spaces, and I'm sure you feel the same way, You don't question why you're there. You know that you're deserving, you're worthy of being in that space. But there's also not a fear of, okay, if this doesn't work out, I won't be able to try something else new. Like, I feel so excited and motivated to know that dentistry is an incredible career and there is no limit. And for most folks, they haven't been willing to pull that, I don't know, that veil back or that blockage back of just giving it a try. Just give it a try. There is no fail. There are lessons, there are things, there's skills. Like you said, your husband said, "Hey, just give it a try." And
Yeah.
it wound up being an amazing opportunity. Those are things that I've never shied away from. And I hope that listeners hear that fear sometimes prevents us from really gaining those additional skills that can lead us to having multiple things that we do within our career that we love, not just clinical hygiene.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely correct when you say it's the fear that holds us back, because for me, it was the fear of reducing my income by so much, like, going from almost six figures to, but sure enough, within a couple of years of being with the company, you get a couple raises, you start
Mhm.
getting commission on this and that. And by the end of the year, I was making almost similarly what I was making working clinically. And I was like beating myself up. What if I had not
Mhm.
taken the opportunity because I was so scared? I know hygienists, a lot of us, when we look at different opportunities outside of clinical, working with companies that, you might be doing sales, a lot of those salaries are low paying, but they do offer commission. But I think most of us don't take that leap because we're like, one, it's like we're taking a cut in our salary, but two, it's sales. And like you said, just give it a try. If you
Yeah,
don't like it, you can go back to doing it. There's always an office that needs a hygienist.
exactly. You could always go back to clinical. That's a
Mhm.
blessing as long as you don't give up your license. Don't give up
Yeah,
that license. I don't care what's
exactly.
going on. Don't give.
Yeah, you're in North
Woo!
Carolina. Are you originally from North Carolina?
No, I'm originally from New York City, and then I went to school in Maryland, and
And
so
you
I was
have your
licensed.
license from Maryland?
I have my license in Maryland, and now I have
Wow.
it in North Carolina.
Oh, yay. And I'm
Yeah,
sure it was tough getting it in North Carolina, I'm
it was
sure.
ridiculous. It was ridiculous. I had to retake my boards. I
Oh,
had
you
to re
retook boards. Wow.
because of their requirements. So if you're not, they didn't care whether or not you were in education. If you haven't practiced clinically for at least 2 years,
Wow.
then you can't get a license. Like, there's no transferring of the license. So I was mistold something by my employer at the time that was at a dental hygiene school. I didn't need to have my license in North Carolina to be able to teach full time. So I didn't
Oh,
get it. Had
wow.
I attempted to get it at the time then when I first moved here, it would have been an easeful process for me because I was working clinically.
Wow.
Not totally, because they require a letter from the dentist that you've been employed with for 2 years, but I also was one of those temp hygienists that went to so
You're
many
like
different
office to
practices, and I
office.
loved it. I
Yeah.
loved
But you're
it.
like, none of them can write me a letter that I've been there consistently.
Yeah, yeah. So even
Wow.
then, it would have been a challenge, I think, had I did it when I first moved. So I actually want to do a podcast episode about that at a later time
Oh, you
because they
need
did
to,
work my
because
nerves.
you need to. But that being said, that reminds me, like, I will always keep my Arizona license no matter what. Our
Yeah.
Texas move didn't work out, so now we're looking to move to Washington State. So I'm looking into getting my license there. But my thing is, I will always keep my license, and I do try to, no matter what, always work clinically at least once a month.
Okay.
But I have had months where they just go by and it's 2 or 3 months, and then when I get back into the op after a day of, like, 8 patients, I'm like, "Man, I'm exhausted. That was
Yeah.
so tough." But I'm like, "How did I do this 6 days a week when I was working clinically?"
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it's a
crazy.
lot, it's a lot, it's a lot on your body, we don't realize that, which is why it's, like, so important for us to take care of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, all those aspects. It's necessary to be able to continue on in your career, whatever direction you choose,
Oh,
but let's not forget, we are working our butts off clinically, okay?
we are. And I loved when you came on our platform with the company I'm with, you had a great educational course on how to deal with tension in dental offices. I remember being mind blown because I was thinking, oh, man, this isn't in school. We learn clinical and co-diagnosing and all that, but we don't learn how to deal with some of these things that really take a toll on our bodies physically, because some mental health stuff manifests physically.
Yes, yes.
It's like this needs to be a required class in hygiene school, how to deal with
Listen,
tension.
say it louder for the back, Angie, okay? We need to talk about it. We really do. And I made that course because I wish I had it. I wish I
Yeah.
had it before I got sick. I
Oh
really
yeah.
wish I had it. Yeah.
I just think it's important for us as hygienists to have that information. Going back to the immigrant mentality, when I graduated and I started, going office to office, I did eventually find an office that I absolutely loved working at. But I
Mhm.
found that because I had that immigrant mentality where I'm like, I need to work, I need to work, I need to, anything the doctor asks, yes, yes, yes. You want me to come in 3 hours earlier than normal? Yes. You want me to work past my lunch break or work through my lunch break to schedule a patient? Yes. And so I didn't create those healthy boundaries. I
Mhm.
didn't know how to have a conversation with the doctor to let them know that this was really taking a toll on me, and I ended up leaving in the office even though it was really the perfect dental home for me. I just
Mhm.
didn't know how to discuss some of these smaller issues that could have easily been fixed if I had known how to have those discussions. So when you were presenting your course, I was taking notes. I was like, next time around, I will know how to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you're so awesome, Angie, and I appreciate you sharing that. All right, here's our final question. Final question. So, if we were to go back to Angie when you first started dental hygiene school, or when you first started your career as a licensed dental hygienist, what is one word of advice you would give to yourself?
One word. Well, this is two words, but be fearless. And I think I'm stealing this from you when you said, "Don't let that fear bring you down." So
Mhm.
many times I didn't recommend the treatment that a patient needed because I was scared the patient was going to be upset. So many times I missed family events and holidays because I was afraid to ask for a day off. Even now, I'm slowly branching into public speaking, and I've turned down a couple of speaking opportunities because I read the audience size and I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm afraid. Yeah, I'm looking at your face. I hope people can see your face, right?
Lord,
I
I'm gonna wrap her up when we end this recording, y'all.
the
Don't worry,
fear
I'm gonna talk to her.
the fear is so real. And imposter syndrome is
Mm,
so real because I remember my first year at the beginning of my first year as a hygienist, I was working with this hygienist and she had been a hygienist for a year. I was on like week 3. I had just started working.
mhm,
And I remember looking at her. Her name was Colleen. Never saw her again. I'm sure. Hi, Colleen, if you're listening. She was fantastic. And I remember thinking, like, wow, I can't wait till I'm a year in because then I'm going to be like fantastic, like Colleen. I'm going to know it all. I'm going to know what to do when a patient has. I just thought that after a year, I would know it all. And then now I think my bio said 6 years. I think now I'm 7 years in and I still don't know it all. But that imposter syndrome, clinically, as a clinical hygienist, it's gone way down. But now that I'm venturing into like entrepreneurship and other things, that imposter syndrome is just as high as it was when I was in hygiene school, where I'm like, I can't do all of these things. I need help. I need mentorship. I need all of these things because I'm just a scared child going
mm,
into this unknown field.
mm. What a
So
word. Can I speak to you?
yeah,
Recording?
yeah.
Okay. Um, you've been through the worst. You've already been through the worst. You've already gone through the most challenging parts that have caused people to not move forward in their life. You have been blessed. God has blessed you. in ways in which you're living a life that you probably couldn't even imagine. And there's more coming. If he is giving you the inkling for you to move forward and share your story, who are you to tell him that he's wrong?
Love that.
Like, who are you to tell him that? You don't understand that there are Angies that need to know of the possibilities that are out there, and they can't identify with me as a speaker. They can only identify as you. What barriers would you break down for more Latina DACA hygienists to make a difference in our industry where this conversation will no longer be rarity, but it would be the norm?
Love that.
You need to be on the stage and you need to share your story. And when you are given that opportunity, think about what you've already gone through and how God has supported you through that, and how this is just one more hurdle that you're not alone with. And you can do it as long as He's with you. You understand what I'm
Oh,
saying?
I needed that. I needed that.
So she gonna say yes, y'all, to the next speaking gig. All right,
I said
and
yes to
hold her to
this, and
it.
I was scared. So I'm so happy I said yes to being your guest here. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, this has been so wonderful. I'm glad you said yes to letting me share that, because I know there's somebody else that feels the same way. And you're a beautiful, beautiful person. Just lovely. And I can't wait to continue to see you grow in your own professional career. So let the listeners know where they can follow you
Yes.
and learn more about you.
Yes, definitely. If there's any DACA or non-DACA dental hygienists that have questions, need mentorship, anything like that, feel free to find me on Instagram at Angy, A-N-G-Y, RDH, or LinkedIn. Or if you want to send me an email, you can do it at a.rodriguezrdh@gmail.com. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Angie.